Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the X-Plane 12 Deep Dives. Today, I'm joined with Philipp Ringler. Hi, Philipp.
Hi.
And today, we are going to talk all about the aircraft within X-Plane 12. So, without further ado, we're going to get cracking. Welcome, Philipp.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Doing great. I took afternoon off of flying, even though it's great weather outside where I am. I could be outside flying airplanes, but instead I'm sitting down for the interview with you.
Well, I feel very, very privileged, and hopefully we'll deliver something to the viewers that they weren't expecting. So thank you very much for your time today. Why don't we start by telling those who don't know too much about you exactly what you do at Laminar Research?
Hey, so yeah, my name is Philipp Ringler. I started out with Laminar about 8 or 9 years ago at this point. Previously, I worked with Javier Rolon on the CRJ and with Roman on the 777 and the 757. And yeah, I've been with Austin on X-Plane since about 2013-ish, somewhere there. And I work at the intersection of the X-Plane world and the aircraft. And I like to explain this by saying that I deal with everything in the aircraft that doesn't have air going over it. So obviously the flight physics with like the air goes over the wing and is displaced by the flaps, and then the downrush from the flap hits the horizontal stabilizer, and that causes some effect there. This is all Austin territory. So I look at this code and I'm like, oh, okay, if Austin says so, yep, that's how it works. So I don't really get into that. So my part of the airplane starts basically on the inside in the cockpit when you're looking at the instruments, at the airspeed indicator, at the attitude indicator, at your navigation instruments, the VOR, the GPS, and all that kind of stuff. So this is where my area starts. But I think this intersection of you have the whole world that X-Plane simulates, and then you have this little airplane in this world. The connection between these two, I think this best describes what I'm doing. So of course, I guess your viewers have seen the Ben and Austin talk about weather and clouds and real world weather and all the data we do with that. And there was a discussion under the video where people were saying, "Oh, do we get this the interaction with the temperature and the altimeter?" And I think I did a video on my YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago, or months at this point, probably. But of course, my YouTube channel gets like 300 views of people who are really interested, and that's it. So here for the broader audience, I'm here to say that yes, cold weather operations and cold weather temperature correction is a thing in X-Plane 12. If you fly into the mountains and into like Aspen, Colorado in January, and it's minus 15 degrees outside, your altimeter will indicate too little. You will need to correct your altimeter for cold weather. Otherwise, you're going to hit a mountain. So that is totally a thing. It was discussed in the comments. People were wondering whether X-Plane 12 has that, and I say, yep, we have it. So when you download the real weather, the current real world conditions, of course, real world data tells us where the pressure levels are, and your altimeter will be off by this point. But even if you set your own weather because you want a training scenario, I mean, right now it's warm outside, but I want to test how this works in the winter. So if you change the weather and X-Plane manually and say it's really cold now, and you fly an approach, you see that you have to do the temperature correction. So basically, what I do is I do all the things behind the scenes that people don't see because they're looking for fancy graphics. The other example for this is so we have the new Citation X in X-Plane 12, and the Citation X has a very interesting system to get rid of rain. So normally you would think, yeah, well, you have a windscreen and you have windshield wipers, right? So you look at most jets like a 737 is windshield wipers. So, and of course in X-Plane 12 we have this beautiful new 3D rain on the glass, and I'm sure you've seen that in a previous video. Sydney has done phenomenal work starting out with LibRain that you all know and love from X-Plane 11, and in X-Plane 12 it's been redone, works with Vulkan, works with metal, obviously, and gives you those gorgeous raindrop effects on the windshield. So now you load the Citation X in X-Plane 12, and you sit at an airport, and it's pouring down rain, and you notice, this jet doesn't have a windshield wiper. It's like a 172. So in the 172, you also don't have a windshield wiper, but you got the prop in front of you. So in the 172, if you throttle up a little bit, you get the prop wash over the windshield, and all the raindrops are pushed back by the prop wash. But of course, in the Citation, there's no prop in front of the cockpit. So how do you get rid of the rain if you don't have a windshield wiper? So what they did at Cessna, that's really interesting, is they have the avionics cooling exhaust in front of the windshield. So basically, you've got all these electronic boxes, all the computers for the avionics in the nose of the airplane, and there's a fan that pulls air through the avionics and expels the hot air for avionics cooling. And then they have a switch in the cockpit where you can boost that fan by, I don't know, 10x or something. So that fan that normally just leisurely exhausts the avionics cooling just spools up and creates a really fast airstream, just blows the air over the windshield and blows the rain back. And yeah, that's a small item that is new in the systems of X-Plane 12, that you can boost up your avionics cooling fan, and then you get this airflow effect over the windshield.
So that's a really amazing integration with the systems inside of a unique aircraft like the Citation X and the world around us in X-Plane. Is there any more features that are just like that are actually almost underappreciated from a regular day-to-day simmer like myself?
Yeah, I mean, there are things that a very small group of simmers care for, but they have been bugging me in X-Plane 11 forever and ever about it. And we put it in X-Plane 12, and I guess not many people will notice, but the people who notice and the people who care will be very glad about it. So one thing about this is the sun and moon times. So in X-Plane 12, we go off the actual equation of time for movement of the sun and the moon. So throughout the year, you get the exact time for sunset and end of civil evening twilight, and how far the sun dips over like the 30 or 45 minutes, or however long it takes from sunset to end of civil evening twilight. So you get exactly the right amount of daylight at exactly the right time at every time during the year. And of course, the moon rises at the correct time. Not that you would want to navigate off like the sun or the moon, but for some people it's important to know, okay, at this time of the year, if I want to log night flying, and by ICAO standards you log night flying at the end of civil evening twilight, and now the time in X-Plane is it going to be exactly the same time as in the real world. Or another thing about the magnetic variation. So whenever magnetic variation changes, right, the procedures change because you get a new magnetic heading on something. So in X-Plane 12, the magnetic variation is actually time dependent. So it's dynamic. As you use X-Plane 12 over the course of its life, the magnetic variation you get will drift according to the actual annual variation that you have in real life. And again, niche feature, probably not many people will ever notice this, but those who care will hopefully be excited about it.
So that's a great interaction with the wider world and the systems that you're sort of designing. How does that affect the systems within inside the aircraft?
Well, for example, most general aviation aircraft, or the better general aviation aircraft, have a slaving compensator for the directional gyro. So the directional gyro is in itself doesn't know where north is. The pilot sets it, and it works off from there. But in the more modern or more better equipped aircraft, you have a magnetometer that senses the Earth magnetic field, and then applies an offset to the gyro to keep the magnetic north reference. And so the question is, what do you do with that if you get in a region somewhere in northern Canada where the magnetic offset is just huge, or changes so much over the course of the year that it's basically useless. So they use true course procedures for IFR up there, where headings are referenced in true north, and in X-plane you can decouple the magnetometer from the directional gyro, and then you have a little switch in the cockpit. In the Baron you see that, or in the Citation X, even in the Citation X you have a switch on the AHARS panel where you can then realign your gyro with whatever you need. True north, probably in that case. And you have this little indicator on the ND that shows you the difference between what the magnetometer sees and how the gyro is aligned. And when you fly a curve, you can, when you're in a turn, you can see the dip error of the compass on there. And this whole gyro and AHARS thing is, I think, very much improved in X-Plane 12. So, for example, in X-Plane 12, every airplane with a directional gyro also has an adjustment screw per user that is kept with like the airplane settings. So if you start flying your airplane in, I don't know, the mid latitudes, the airplane remembers, okay, I'm being flown in the mid latitude, so my directional gyro is compensated to the apparent wander that you get at, I don't know, 40 degrees north. And then you take the same airplane and fly at 60 degrees north. Your directional gyro is going to drift more because it was calibrated for the apparent wander at like 30 degrees, but you're flying at 60 degrees. So where you fly your airplane actually affects what kind of compass error, excuse me, not compass error, but a drift error you will get on your on your directional gyro. And that is, I don't think, something again, not a feature that many people care for, but once you know about it, oh, I can change the setting of my gyro in the 172. Like, how cool is that?
And that's a saved state with the aircraft, so you might load it up in northern Canada next, and that setting will be the same, but the drift will be more.
Exactly. Exactly.
Fantastic. So obviously, lots of these changes have come about through your real-world flying experience. Could you take us through a bit more of that and how that influences X-plane?
Oh, absolutely. So I've been flying for pretty much exactly as long as I've been working on X-plane. I got my pilot's license in 2013. Since then, I've accumulated a little more than 1,600 hours of flight time. I've been an instructor since 2016. I've been flight instructing for a little bit over 500 hours now. I've gotten a number of people through their instrument and commercial ratings, instrument ratings, commercial pilot's licenses. So the being an instructor and just being out at the airfield and flying with different people, many of whom don't even know what my actual day job is to them. I'm just one of the flight instructors in the flying club. So that, of course, gives me lots of ideas of what we need in X-plane. So there have been a couple of times where, okay, I get up in the morning, I drive out to the airport, I have a student, we fly around for a little bit, and during the flight, I notice something like, that's curious. Couldn't we have that in X-plane? So I finish the lesson. I make a note that I want to look at something. I drive home. I get lunch, and I sit down on my computer and I code something in X-plane based off an experience I had in the morning. So, for example, little things. So, for example, I teach on a Diamond DA40 with the old Lycoming engine, and that one has a blue knob to adjust the prop pitch or the prop governor. And when you do a run-up in the morning, first flight of the day, part of the run-up is you cycle the prop 3 times to get the oil going, get the oil into the prop hub, exercise the blades, and you're looking for certain indications. For example, you're looking, when you pull the blue knob, there's a momentary dip in oil pressure. Why? Because the prop governor is stealing oil out of the engine, pushing it to the prop to twist the blades. And that's the thing that I check for when I check the real airplane. And so that was a thing that I do this all the time with my students every morning. First flight of the day, we check this. And at some point, it occurred to me, I don't think we have that oil pressure drop in X-plane. Would be kind of cool to have it. So I get home, I look at the code, I spend, I don't know, half an hour making a little tweaks and send it to Austin. And I'm like, hey, now we have this tiny minuscule drop of the oil pressure gauge when you exercise the prop. And the other thing, we were just talking about the magnetometer, where you can change the whether the gyro works off the magnetometer or not. The reason I coded this in X-plane is because my flying club had a Mooney where that magnetometer was broken. So if you left it in the default position, it would just spin the compass around. It was completely useless. So we had a procedure in the club. Okay, you make sure the switch is so that it's decoupled. Then you taxi over to the compass rose. You align the plane with the numbers that are painted on the taxiway, and then you use the little switch to align it, and then it works for the rest of the flight. And I did this in the Mooney, and I came home and I tried to do this in X-plane, and I found that we didn't have a good way to simulate this in X-plane. So I sat down, coded it, and after a day, I sent it off to Austin and say, hey, now we have this feature. And those features are never part of any roadmap. Like there's no big whiteboard that said in X-plane 12 we want to have this little drop of the oil pressure when you check the prop, and in X-plane 12 we want to have this way of adjusting the compass when the magnetometer is broken. No, that wasn't part of any roadmap. That was me flying in the morning, and I get home and I code it because I saw it that day.
And Austin almost has the same enthusiasm around his small tweaks, you know. And I was speaking to Ben in a previous video, and Ben spends most of his time kind of just saying, okay, well, here's where we draw the line for this version of X-plane. Let's add this into the next one. And I imagine the energy between yourself and Austin is quite infectious with the team. But
yeah, much to Ben's dismay. So when it comes down to getting our code into X-plane, because Ben is very focused. He has an exact plan of what needs to be in and what he will not take anymore, and where to cut the line. So Ben has a very clear idea of where everything is going, whereas Austin and me often work on, oh, this is cool, I want this, let's make it. So
yeah, I don't envy Ben at all, but I appreciate both yours and Austin's enthusiasm to make those marginal gains to a simulator that we all know and love. So it's just brilliant to know that you're out flying in the morning, and then there's new features to X-plane 12 for the next alpha testers and all of that by the afternoon. I think that's really impressive. So I heard a rumor, and maybe you can settle this for me, but you know Roman of Flight Factor rather well, and it may protrude to your CFI days. Is that true? Did you teach Roman how to fly?
Well, I didn't teach him how to fly as a private pilot. He got his training for that in Latvia. But I taught him to fly instruments. He got his instrument rating with me. He got his commercial pilot license with me. And most recently, I taught him to become a CFI himself. And I sent him off for the CFI test. And he passed with flying colors. And passing the FAA CFI test, that is the hardest check ride you'll ever have. So passing CFI on the first go is an achievement, and I'm very proud of Roman that he did so. So we have been flying together a lot. So Roman started flying a bit after me, and I think he's catching up in hours on me because he flies quite a lot himself. So last year there was Flight Sim Expo in San Diego. And the way we got there is Roman came to me in North Carolina, and we took our flying club's little Diamond DA40, and we flew it across the whole country over the Rocky Mountains. We flew it all the way over to California over the course of the week. And of course, that was an amazing experience. seeing seeing so much of the country, unfortunately, over the course of just 4 or 5 days, because we didn't have the time to spend anywhere for long. But we flew over the Grand Canyon, we flew over Sedona, Arizona. We hit all the scenic spots. That was absolutely awesome. And of course, if two people like this fly together, we get ideas for things that we need in a simulator. So uh, just flying, just flying long distance, and hitting all kinds of airports with weird procedures. And I like to pick weird procedures for Roman when he was getting his instrument rating. So we go to an airport that has an offset VOR approach, where you have to where the missed approach point is at some point offset from the runway. Then you have to look out and kind of circle around to get to the airport. And of course, that is the kind of stuff that also then ends up being tested in X-Plane, because I pick an airport with a weird approach to take my student to, in this case Roman, and we went to this airport through this offset VOR approach. And then of course the next thing I do when I get home is try this in X-Plane and make sure it works just the same in X-Plane. And so for X-Plane 12, we have done a few fun things. I went spin testing with Roman in a little Cessna, and we went to a safe altitude. Obviously, everything is done responsibly. So you fly your little box pattern and look out, make sure there's no airplanes under you, and you make sure on ADS-B like there's really no traffic there, and you have at least 5,000 AGL. And then you take your little Cessna and stall it and stomp on the rudder and spin it. And we had a of course, data recording. So we were recording. So we had an ADS-B receiver with built-in AHRs, and that was sending the data to my iPad, where I run Cloud Ahoy, which is an app that records flight data, ARS data, basically like a flight data recorder in a big airliner. This kind of equipment I have in a little device that I suction cup to the window, and the iPad that's on my kneeboard. So basically, between this little suction cup thing on the window and my kneeboard, I have a flight data recorder, and we use that to fly some power off and some power on spins. And that was really interesting, and I think also provided useful feedback to Austin. So, for example, it is actually quite hard to sustain a spin in an airplane that is as benign as a 172, I would say, because a 172 you have to fight to spin it. It doesn't want to spin on its own. You really have to manhandle it to get it to spin. And whenever you relax the controls, it snaps out of the spin all on its own. It then goes into a steep spiral and starts picking up speed like crazy. So you still need to make a proper recovery, because if you just let go of the controls, you're just going down and picking up speed. Yeah, you're no longer spinning, but you're hitting red line speed in like no time at all. So, so you still have to be proper about your recovery. But the point of that exercise was, does the airplane sustain spin if you let go of the rudder? Will it keep spinning? And the answer is absolutely not. Neither the 152 nor the 172 will just keep spinning. No, as soon as you let go of the control pressures, the airflow attaches itself again, and then you are, in my opinion, worse off than before, because then you're pointed at the ground, rapidly picking up speed, and then you really need to apply the proper recovery procedure. So doing this with my best student by my side, that was obviously tons of fun.
And maybe he'll demonstrate that in a 777 and put it in his rendition of the 777 next.
Yeah, we had a similar discussion with Jan, who is our advisor on the A330, and Austin had a few questions, and Jan's only response was, "Yeah, I can answer that if you bail me out of jail afterwards and give me a new job, because Lufthansa will fire me if I try that." So with a little Cessna, we have a few more liberties. The other thing that I tried, and again, I must say I do these experiments at least somewhat responsibly, in that I do them over an airport, and I do them like on a weekday morning when there's not a lot of traffic there. I don't do this when there's lots of people going in and out over the airport. So what I tried is how much internal resistance does a piston engine actually have? So the idea is, you kill the engine with the mixture control. Does the prop stop when you kill the engine with the mixture control? It doesn't. So because the internal friction of the engine is easily overcome by the air going through the prop, windmilling the prop. But we didn't know like how many like Newton meters of torque do we need to keep it spinning, and we couldn't really figure this out because it's not documented anywhere. There's nowhere in the POH that it says, oh, if you kill the engine, the prop will keep spinning to such and such airspeed. So what I did one morning is I took a plane and I went over the airport and I killed the engine. And in case I couldn't get it started again, the airport was right underneath me, so this is all done responsibly. But with the engine killed, I reduced the speed and went into slow flight, extended the flaps, and at some point came up to like very close to stall speed that the prop would finally hit those compression strokes of the engine. So we could record we could record with the speed and knowing the parameters of the prop exactly how many Newton meters that was. And in X-Plane 12 we now have a setting where you can configure the internal friction of the engine and tell how many cylinders it has, because this is very different for a radial engine with 9 cylinders than it is for the little 4-cylinder boxer engine in the 172. So in X-Plane 12 you can configure this, and then you get exactly this effect as you get slower and slower, that the prop stops spinning and keeps hitting like the compression stroke and turns over like half a turn and wobbles, right, and then turns over another half a turn and wobbles again, and you get exactly that effect in X-Plane now. So once it's stopped there, I found that I needed to accelerate the plane to like 100 knots before the prop would start spinning again. Yeah, that was an interesting experience. Just circling over the airport with the engine intentionally shut off to find out this kind of thing.
It's a very heavy glider.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it. So we spoke about fixed wing, and obviously you're a fixed wing CFI. We are slowly seeing with this edition of X-Plane, the Robinson R22 being adapted. Austin did lots of work to the aerodynamics of helicopters. Where do you fit in with the helicopter production in terms of systems?
So I actually got some helicopter lessons for X-Plane 12. I think I have about 5 hours or so now in my logbook with a CFI on an R22 to find out certain things about the systems. Not so much about the flight dynamics, because in 5 hours you can't learn exactly how the dynamics of the helicopter work. So I defer to people like Brett Sumter, who is a veteran Army helicopter pilot who has provided lots of feedback to Austin about the flight model. But the way I approached it is I wanted to make sure all the controls in the cockpit do the right thing. So, for example, the R22, most of them have a governor, but you can easily still fly the helicopter with the governor switched off if you just tweak the throttle just a little bit. And the reason is, in addition to the governor, which is an active component, there's also a passive component in the system called the correlator, which adjusts the throttle most of the way already, so you are kind of close to the throttle setting that you need, and then the governor just does a little bit of fine tuning and tweaking on top of that. And in X-Plane 11 we never had this distinction. The governor would always do all the work and was frequently overwhelmed and couldn't do it correctly. So in X-Plane 12, now that I've actually crawled under the R22 to see how the linkage is connected from the from the collective and then connected to the carburetor. So and how this mechanically works, and I think we have recreated the mechanical connection, and then the electronic controller on top that does the fine tuning after the mechanical connection has done the bulk of the work already. And I think we reproduce this quite faithfully in X-Plane 12. And unfortunately, I could not convince anyone that I should get enough money to like fly a turbine helicopter or anything. So here it's just based on hanging out with the mechanics at the flight school that where I had the R-22. They also have a turbine helicopter, and they let me sit in it and look at the controls, look how some things work. So the big thing for turbine helicopters in X-Plane 12, I'm not sure how familiar you are with flying helicopters in X-Plane 11, but most third-party developers in X-Plane 11 have repurposed an unused axis, like a wing sweep or some other control that the helicopter doesn't actually have, and repurpose that to recreate the throttle, or rather the condition lever of a turbine helicopter with a so you can assign it a joystick axis. And I've looked at what people are doing. I understand why they are doing it, because X-Plane 11 couldn't do it realistically otherwise. And with my experience hanging out with the turbine helicopter mechanics, I think I have now recreated this correctly in X-Plane 12, that you can have a throttle or condition lever rather in a turbine helicopter that actually works like the real thing, and it ties into the hardware correctly. Like you don't have to repurpose like the wing sweep axis to get the helicopter to work correctly. No, it works. It works based on the default assignments now.
Amazing. And I've tried and tried and tried, but hopelessly cannot fly a helicopter in X-Plane 12, in X-Plane 11. More because of user error. They are just so sensitive. And
They
I
are. They
and
are.
I find that yeah, they're just way too sensitive, and I don't have the hardware to sort of cope with helicopters. How do you get on with flying helicopters inside X-Plane 11?
As I said, I don't know enough about helicopters with just 5 hours. I couldn't say whether something flies realistically or not. I defer my judgment to other people there. But of course, it boils down to having the right hardware. So for example, with most joysticks that are self-centering, you couldn't fly a helicopter in the first place unless you utilize force trim, which of course we haven't have in X-Plane 2. And if you use force trim liberally, yeah, then you kind of make this work. But you see specialized helicopter controls that don't self-center, or some people take a spring out of their joystick to make that work. And for flying helicopters, I think that's absolutely necessary. But in terms of hardware, I don't know if you can see behind me what I have up there, like the old CH Pro pedals. They are from, I think mine I bought in 2002.
Wow.
Those pedals up there, and they still work. I still use them occasionally. Um, so interaction with hardware is a thing that I have thought a lot about in X-Plane 12. The one shortcoming we already talked about, like using an axis that's not really meant for the helicopter. I saw a similar thing with Airbus and Embraer type of aircraft, where you have a throttle axis that has a detent. Like you know, on an Airbus, you have a throttle that has a free range, and then it goes cluck 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 into certain detents to tell the computer to do something. And of course, then every add-on maker comes up with their way how to interact with the various hardware that's out there. And Flight Factor does it one way, and Tolis does it a different way. And then they use joystick curves in X-Plane, and then not all the planes are prepared to deal with the joystick curves. So what I did is, because we have a default Airbus, the Airbus A330 in X-Plane now. Um, I've come up with like a standardized way inside the X-plane setup, inside the X-plane throttle setup. You can tell X-plane, oh, I have a throttle that I want to have a mechanical stop or a mechanical notch for like a max continuous flex thrust toga and whatsoever. So you can configure your hardware, and I believe we supply a default profile for the Thrustmaster TCA Airbus throttle quadrant as well. So if you plug in your Thrustmaster Airbus hardware that has those notches, um, X-Plane knows what that is. X-Plane knows, okay, there's a notch. I need to issue a command and tell the computer, oh, this user wants like max continuous now, or the user wants toga now. And the idea is you configure your throttle quadrant once, and it works with the X-plane default aircraft. I mean, the Citation has basically the same thing. The Citation also has a cruise, a climb, and a toga notch on the on the throttles. And then we have data refs that allow third-party aircraft to use that. So if you are a third-party developer, of course you might think that the what X-Plane does in terms of engine control, in terms of FADEC, is too basic, because you have the real-world Airbus manuals and you know exactly what should happen if this controller fails and that circuit breaker is pulled. So you say, X-Plane default doesn't do the fidelity that I need yet. But you can use the data refs and let X-Plane take care of the user configuring their joystick. And the expectation is that the user configures their flight controls once and their throttle quadrant once, and then everyone else who needs that just piggybacks off the data refs that X-Plane provides, and then they can put their controller, their plug-in driven, super specific, super realistic Airbus controller behind that, but they don't need to bother the user with setting up their flight controls like 2 or 3 times if they have different aircraft.
Yeah, and we've seen a huge increase in saturation in the market for those types of products. So I can't wait to plug in my TCA and only have to configure it once for all of my aircraft. That's a really exciting feature for
Wouldn't
me.
that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, yeah, it really would. It really would. So you spoke about the amazing Airbus A330 that has sort of graced X-Plane 12, the first Airbus to do so for default. Um,
Right.
has there been any challenges with that? Obviously, it's got different, it's got a completely different FMS system to a Boeing aircraft. How
Right.
has that been challenging for you?
Uh, so of course the Airbus is a different beast. But I found the new FMS for the Citation to be much more hard to wrap my head around than the Airbus. So the site, because the Citation, it has got such a small screen. It's only 4 lines of text and only 4 line select keys, because it's made to fit into a very tiny cockpit of a business jet. And the logic to operate a flight plan that goes over the North Atlantic and has, I don't know, 40 waypoints or whatever, and you only fit 4 on the screen, and then you need to have all the editing capabilities on just 4 lines of text. So the Citation FMS has been much more of a pain to get to work right than the Airbus FMS. I don't think the Airbus FMS will be in the beta release of X-Plane. Just has too many rough edges yet, because I need to wrap my head around it and then bounce ideas off of Jan, who of course flies Airbus in real life. Um, but I think in terms of how different is it, I think people will have much more fun, quote unquote, with the Citation than with the Airbus, because I think most people will have an intuitive understanding of how to operate the FMS in the Airbus, and when they go to the Citation, everything looks different, everything works differently. I think that's going to be a steeper learning curve actually than the Airbus.
And so apart from the FMS system in the Cessna Citation, are there any other system challenges? Obviously, we've gone into the minute detail of those avionic sort of blasters that blast the windscreen with warm air.
Right.
How else does the Cessna Citation go even deeper to that level? Are there any other systems that are quite challenging?
Yeah, so the Citation is, I think, the first airplane that is completely uh, built from the ground up with dual controls and dual flight control hardware in mind. So you might have seen cockpit setups where people build home cockpits that actually have like duplicated flight controls for pilot and co-pilot. And in X-Plane 12, we have native support for that. So you can actually plug in two joysticks into the same computer and say, hey, this joystick controls the pilot side and this joystick controls the co-pilot side. That works for flying an Airbus. I mean, Airbus, it's obvious that the joysticks are not connected and they are just sending their own signals, and then the Airbus sums the signal, or you can press a button on the joystick that gives you priority on one side, and you can hold that button to hold the priority over a longer time, and of course all that stuff works. Um, but the Citation is an airplane that is conventionally flown. So the yokes are linked. It's not like in the Airbus, if you move joystick on one side and then the side stick on the other side doesn't move. In the Citation they are linked. But in the Citation we support the types of failures where one side of the airplane jams, so you have some kind of flight control failure, let's say in the right wing, and then the right aileron doesn't work anymore. Okay, so what happens? So you're stuck with a jammed aileron and can't move around the roll axis anymore. What you can do in this type of airplane, you can pull a big red handle and split the airplane, the flight controls, in two. And then the yokes are not actually linked anymore. So the flight control on the pilot side controls the left aileron and the left half of the elevator, and the flight control on the co-pilot side controls the right aileron and the right half of the elevator. And normally they all move together, but if you pull that red handle, they are suddenly split. And now, of course, you can still fly the airplane kind of with the left aileron alone. And then there's even a switch where you can say, okay, we're flying the airplane from the left side now, but I want the right roll spoiler still be connected to the input from the left yoke. And yeah, so that's a thing that works in the Citation. You can split the flight controls, and then you can decide, okay, I sit in the pilot seat and I fly the pilot side of the airplane, or I sit in the co-pilot seat and I fly the co-pilot side of the aircraft. And you get the correct control response in that you're now flying only half the elevator or only flying half of the ailerons. And and then eventually, I don't know, you land successfully, hopefully, because the airplane is going to be very weird to control, and then you'll put everything back together. And I learned this on an Embraer flight simulator, and the problem is that the sim instructors don't really like to do this in their simulators, because once you've split it in the full flight simulator, it's like in the real aircraft. They have to call in a mechanic, they have to call in a flight simulator mechanic to connect the flight controls back together and insert the pin that you pulled out with the red lever. So it's a pain to do this even in a full flight simulator, because you need the mechanic to come in afterwards to connect everything back together. And in X-Plane, it's, of course, you can easily just click the handle and put it back in, and X-Plane connects everything back together. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun to develop. Like, plug two joysticks into the computer and pretend, oh, I fly from the left side, I fly from the right side, and see what happens. And of course, there's data refs for all of that. So people who fly with a smart co-pilot, the idea is that a smart co-pilot then can make use of those data refs, and people fly together online. And the guy who sits in the co-pilot seat, then they can actually actuate the flight controls with the co-pilot side data refs. And with that, I believe you could fly with two sets of flight controls, even remotely, even over network. And I mean, smart co-pilot does a really great job at doing this. And I think as soon as they pick up on the co-pilot flight control data refs, you could practice flight control failures in the citation. So that's been a lot of fun to develop. The flight controls, each flight control surface can now be assigned their hydraulics individually. So if you make a wing, like the wing on the 757 or 767, which has enormous amount of spoilers on top of it, and inner aileron and outer aileron, and now in X-Plane 12 in Plane Maker, you can take each of these surfaces and say, okay, on the right wing, the inner aileron is actuated by this hydraulic system, and on the left wing, the outer aileron gets power from this and that hydraulic system, and you can build the wings, and with each different flight control on each wing with each hydraulic system, and then you can practice things like, okay, I failed the blue hydraulic system. Which flight controls do I still have left? And so that kind of fidelity in system simulation has just not been possible in X-Plane 11 before. If you wanted to do this kind of thing, and I remember we did this back in 2013 with the 757, is you have to overwrite everything and actuate all the flight controls separately. But in X-Plane 12, you can just build it in Plane Maker and say, hey, this hydraulic fluid goes there and this hydraulic fluid goes there, and then X-Plane figures out for you how the airplane will fly with half the hydraulics missing.
That's really interesting. And go back to the Cessna Citation X, I wouldn't trust myself to not pull that big red lever. It's just
it's fun just to see what happens, right? Just to fly half the airplane and see if you can roll it back into a level flight. Yeah. So you can jam an aileron in some weird position, and then you give yourself, I don't know, 5 seconds of startle factor by the time the airplane is probably flying like this, and you're like, oh, I could pull the red handle and try to get myself out of it with the left aileron alone. And maybe if I remember to also wire up the flight spoiler to the other side by pressing that button, maybe with the aileron and the flight spoiler working, I can rescue the airplane. So yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun for sure.
And obviously, we've talked about helicopter flight. We've talked about the 330 and the Citation X. One of my personal favorite aircraft, having just watched Top Gun, is the F-14. Now,
right.
We've gone from the Citation X, which is very complex, lots of digital systems. What's the challenge for the F-14 for yourself?
I don't have much insight into the F-14 because I've only been tangentially related with the development. That's all been Jim Gregory and Alex Andrew who did this. What I did for them is the digital flight control system. So the autopilot, the F-14 has a kind of rudimentary autopilot that is unlike everything else you know from civilian aircraft. Like, okay, it has altitude hold. Yeah, you also find altitude hold on a civilian aircraft, but that's about where the similarities end, because the panel looks like nothing you would expect from a civilian autopilot, and they just couldn't make it work with the way X-Plane treated autopilot so far. So I gave them all the special functions they needed to make the autopilot work. But in terms of other F-14 specific dynamics, I believe Austin has talked a bit about the supersonic and transonic flight dynamics that affect the F-14. But that's really not my area of expertise. If as I said, if it has air going over it, no, Austin deals with that.
That's yeah, you could tell his passion for the F-14 was, similar to mine watching Top Gun last couple of weeks.
Absolutely. I haven't even seen it. Did you enjoy it? Is it worth going in theater? I haven't seen it yet.
So without spoilers, it's a very good film. Whether it's a sequel or not, I probably don't think it's as good as the first one. It is very different, but I mean, who doesn't love fast jet flying and a bit of Tom Cruise
Right.
doing action stuff? So it's a great film. It's a great film. I'd urge you to go
Oh,
see it.
we saw one of the bandits of the original Top Gun. Where was that? And it was some place middle of nowhere in Texas. So Roman and I are on the way to Flight Sim Expo in San Diego, and we fly over a place where there's lots of airplanes parked there, like fighters and weird airplanes, old airplanes. Like, this looks like a museum. Let's land there. So we just call in on CTAP. Of course, there's no one there. It's middle of nowhere in Texas. We land there and just park our plane there and walk around. And one of the planes that was parked there, if I remember correctly, was a oh god, I'm going to butcher this, and everyone who knows everything about Top Gun will of course know much better. But they had a MiG, quote unquote, in the original Top Gun that wasn't actually a MiG. It was a repainted something other jet trainer, and one of those we saw at that museum. Yeah.
I believe they were F4 Tiger twos, or sorry, F5 Tiger twos. But yeah,
I think you might be right. So they called it a MiG, but it wasn't actually a MiG. They just
yeah, it was
painted it differently.
a million miles away from a MiG. But in the 80s, I don't think you probably could have got hold of a MiG anywhere near the US. So there we are.
Right.
We've also got the addition of Austin's beloved Lancer Evolution 850, and I
Right.
imagine any work that you do to recreate that in X-Plane holds a certain I don't know, weight to it, because if you get it wrong, someone's definitely in the team's going to know,
Exactly.
right? Um,
Exactly. So I've flown with Austin on this plane for, I think about 35 hours that I have actually flown Austin's plane. Always with him with me. This plane is kind of scary, and it requires a lot of attention. You can never let this plane get away from you. You can never not pay attention for a minute. So this is why I've only flown this airplane with Austin by my side. Um, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Everything that goes into the evolution, into the PT6 engine that's on it, the all the uh, systems attached to the PT6, like prop governor, overspeed governor, fuel topping governor, like how does beta and reverse work, and uh, yeah, all of that stuff. If we get any of this wrong, Austin is going to be the one to freak out and be like, "This is not how my airplane flies." And of course, this is probably this is probably the airplane that has gone through the most, like, quality control or quality assurance. So when you unwrap X-Plane 12, this airplane just has a sticker on it that says QC passed by Austin, basically.
well, it's a decent stamp to have, and obviously the systems in the Evolution is based on the Garmin digital systems. Um,
Right.
will we see other aircraft like the Cessna 172? Obviously, it has the G1000 and X-Plane 11. Will
Mhm.
we see any other current aircraft seeing that same treatment?
Yeah, well, we have the RV now in X-Plane, another experimental. It's a super nice, super fast, very sleek piston engine aircraft, and of course, that one has a G1000, or probably in real life it would be a G900, which is the same thing, just for not certified, just for home built aircraft. And some work has gone into this because that is used on a FAA certified flight simulators as well. So I guess when you unwrap X-Plane 12 and you get into the 172, the first thing is, looks exactly the same. Where's my updates? Where's my upgrades? Did they change anything? And as soon as you get into the weeds of flying a complex procedure, seeing how a departure procedure works, or how how a procedure turn, barbed arrow procedure turn works in the 172 with the G1000. If you pay really close attention, you're going to notice a lot of things that work differently and more accurately. So basically, my goal has been to change the things that are hard to change for third-party developers. I mean, third-party developers can add a new engine page, and can add an auxiliary page where you can see the GPS parameters, or the auxiliary page where you set up like your flight timers and the trip planning and such and such. So third parties can add this, and we have plenty of add-on aircraft for X-Plane 11 that do that. And of course, I want people to do that for X-Plane 12 as well. And on the other hand, it's very hard for third parties to change like the nitty gritty underlying details. Like, okay, I load. So again, same thing happened. I picked up Roman on at Washington Dulles Airport. And Washington Dulles Airport is not exactly an airport where you fly lots of 172s out of. So getting a 172, or in my case, a Diamond, in and out of Washington Dulles Airport is not a thing many people do. And they assigned me a SID with a heading to altitude leg in it. And I noticed because I never fly that kind of thing in real life. So we are flying out of Washington Dulles Airport in the DA-40 with the G1000, and I noticed, this looks different than it looks in X-Plane. I gotta change that. So that's again, a day later, I'm sitting down coding and changing how that kind of departure leg is treated, and how it's displayed on the G1000. And very few people will notice that, because very few people will go, oh, okay, I go to Washington Dulles and I fly 172 out of Dulles Airport. I mean, who does that? But this is the kind of thing that is very hard for a third party to change, because they can easily add stuff on top of the G1000, but they can't really get into the nitty gritty details and change how the CDI needle does something during a specific departure. So this is the stuff I've been focusing on. This is the stuff that is really different in X-Plane 12. And of course, I'm going to catch flack for that. I'm going to get hate for that. So I know that the second that X-Plane 12 goes beta, people are going to, oh, where's the auxiliary satellite page? And oh no, you haven't changed anything because it looks exactly like it did in X-Plane 11. And what did you do for the past 2 years? And everything is exactly the same. And why did I pay 60 euros or dollars or whatever for an upgrade that's not an upgrade? And hopefully, if they then fly some procedures and look how everything works, and just make a flight plan with a corner in it, and watch what it does during a flyby turn, and how it does the flyby turn differently with different autopilots. Like, we have the G1000 paired with the Garmin autopilot, and we have the G1000 paired with the TrueTrack autopilot in X-Plane 12, and they behave differently. And this is something really hard to do for a third party, but this is something where I think we can really move the needle if we change that in X-Plane 12. So this has been where my focus has been, even though I know I'm to get flack for that, and people will complain about it.
Well, I think, in general, making it easier for third-party developers to build upon the great work that X-Plane has already done is always a positive thing. So hopefully, not too much flack from making it easier for us to get hold of third-party aircraft as well.
Right.
So, that being said, what does the future hold? Maybe X-Plane 12.5 or X-Plane 13. What does it hold for you? What's next for your systems and your aircraft?
Well, of course, there's still lots of refinement to do. But then again, sometimes I have to channel my inner Ben, and at some point we have to say, okay, the citation is as good as a default aircraft in the simulator as part of a fleet of 12 airplanes is going to be. And then again, probably, we saw what happened with the 737 and X-Plane 11. There's a freeware project led by Zibo to completely change to completely change the airplane to a completely different level of realism. And I have no doubt that the same thing is probably going to happen in X-Plane 12 as well. So as far as the default aircraft goes, at some point I have to channel my inner Ben and say, okay, this is as far as we are going to take it, and the default in the simulator ends here, and third party developers will pick it up from here. So what I see in the future following the X-Plane 12 release is I'm getting familiar with new new avionics. So right now I am teaching someone to get his instrument rating on a plane with avionics that I haven't used before. So this is very exciting. My flying club is rebuilding their Moonies. They have two Moonies with old six pack round steam gauge panels, and they are in the process of ordering new Garmin equipment, including a G3X Touch. So over the course of this year, I will get the chance at some point, once this rebuild is done, to fly a G3X Touch for myself, which I haven't done so far. So I think it's kind of obvious that once I have enough experience with this equipment in a real airplane, that they are popping up everywhere in the general aviation world now. Like everyone who rips out old steam gauges out of their panels probably goes for a G3X Touch, because it's the thing to have. It's what everyone is going for now. So I think it's pretty obvious that when I have enough experience flying the flying club Moonies with the G3X Touch, that a G3X Touch is in the future for X-Plane.
Well, that sounds really, really exciting. Finally, I have asked the people that I've interviewed, put you on put you on the spot a little bit. But if you could choose one feature that is coming in X-Plane 12 that you're most excited about, what could it be? And it could be an aircraft, it could be a visual graphic. So I think one of your team members said the water overlapping the land that now happens in X-Plane. If you were to pick one feature.
I would say probably the interaction of water, land, and aircraft, because this is where three completely new design pieces of X-Plane come together in perfection. So you take our seaplane, our 172 on floats, and it's an amphibious plane because you can extract the gear from the floats. So you put the gear down while you are on water, and then you water taxi up to the beach, and you transition seamlessly from float physics to gear physics, because as you roll up the beach, your wheels will touch the ground and more weight will be picked up by the wheels, and the airplane will taxi out onto the beach, out of the water, and the water the seamless transition from the airplane physics to the wheel physics, taxiing an airplane out of the water onto the beach. I think this is where all the cool features of X-Plane 12, like the 3D water, the beautiful watercolors, the beach colors, and the physics come together. I think that's the way to experience X-Plane 12.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for your time. I won't take any more time from you, Philipp. You're quite clearly a busy man. Hopefully, there's still some time to go out flying. I just want to thank you for your time and thank you for your contribution to this X-Plane 12 deep dive.
Happy to contribute. Always fun to talk about the things I love doing. That's part of the fun.
Me too. Me too. Again, thank you very much, Philipp, and thank you very much for watching.
See you.